Well, we've already taken you live to the ILO Global Summit, which is currently underway and was addressed a short while ago by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his role as African Union chairperson, is also taking part as one of the speakers in the conference in assessing the impact of COVID-19 on workers. The theme of this year's summit is building a better future of work. Let's take you there live.
These include expansion of labour protection and promotion of industrial relations systems for job retention, expansion of social protection coverage, employment promotion and skills development, both the upskilling and reskilling. And we're doing this in order to promote re-entry into the labour market after the COVID-19 pandemic. For Thai workers overseas, the government has assisted them by following up on their behalf to ensure their compensation entitlements and social protection benefits are met, as well as arranging safe patriation back home. As for migrant workers in Thailand, the government has employed leniency by relaxing legal measures on extending the validity of visas and work permits. This allows those with legal status to continue working in the country. Relevant information in various languages has been disseminated so that workers can have a better understanding on how to protect themselves from COVID-19. In this regard, insured migrant workers are receiving the same social security remedies as are Thai workers. Thailand is determined to restore its economy and society to the better after the COVID-19 pandemic. We want to do this along the lines of sufficiency economy philosophy that emphasizes the balance between economic, social and environmental development. This philosophy promotes people-centered development and enables sustainable development, which is to leave no one behind. This includes strengthening competency of people, of communities and enterprises in order to promote sustainable and socially responsible business through the promotion of employment and creation of decent work, together with effective social dialogue to create immunity for all sectors in dealing with the challenges and changes of the future world of work. Thailand stands ready to cooperate with the international community in both bilateral and multilateral partnerships in restoring and strengthening the world economy, as well as creating a better and more sustainable society. On this occasion, I'm pleased to invite the International Labour Organization and its member countries to observe the Centenary Declaration for the Future of Work, through adhering to the fundamental principle and rights of work and in strengthening a comprehensive and sustainable social protection system. We must help each other to overcome the crisis. Because today we must survive, tomorrow we must be stronger and move forward, and in moving forward we must make sure that no one is left behind. And we do this by aiming at creation of decent work for all. Thank you.
The Prime Minister for his statement. And the next message will be that of His Excellency Mr. K.P. Sharma Oli, Prime Minister of the Federal Republic of Nepal.
Mr. President, Excellencies, the heads of state and government, Director General of ILO, Mr. Guy Ryder, employers and workers representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Let me commend the Director General of ILO for taking this timely initiative. The world is now seized by an invisible enemy, the pandemic of COVID-19. Over 500,000 people have lost their lives. It is uncertain how it will unfold further. Invention of vaccine and making it judiciously accessible to all remains unclear. In such a situation, protecting the lives of people becomes extremely important. Loss of human life cannot be replenished. The pandemic has thrown millions of workers and enterprises vulnerable. Overall economy has suffered with global decline in investment, trade, and disruption in travel industry. As a consequence, people are losing jobs. Economists project a bleak scenario for global growth in 2020. When labor-intensive job market declines, millions will fall into poverty. The impact becomes unevenly high in the LDCs and low-income countries. Declining remittances and potential reduction in ODA and shrinking of other resources will further compound economic stagnation. Crisis of this proportion calls for robust global response with United Nations and its specialized agencies like ILO at the center. We should support and strengthen them to promote women-centered agenda to decent work is embraced by the ILO. Protection of the most vulnerable, including the migrant workers and those in informal sectors, and provision of adequate social security and health care is key to minimize the impact. However, it is unfortunate that migrant workers who have contributed to the building of destination countries are losing hopes and returning home in the midst of the pandemic without protection of their job and income. This situation, contrary to the ILO principles, could have been avoided and norms of WHO should have been observed in the process. In Nepal, within 108 days, in an average, 3,000 people returned home every day from India, crossing our land border. About 500,000 migrant workers are expected to return from the Gulf region and other countries. It doesn't mean that we are not welcoming our nationals back home. But this scale of sudden return has posed tremendous pressure on our health system as the cases of infection shoot up rapidly. I held several telephone conversations with heads of state and government in labor destination countries seeking their cooperation for the protection and well-being of the Nepali workers. At home, we are protecting foreign nationals in our country during this pandemic. Humanity is tested in the time of crisis. Our conscience should guide us to uphold justice and fairness even in the time of extreme difficulty. International solidarity at this hour could prevent the job loss, return of migrant workers, and reversal in the progress of SDG and resulting rise of poverty. Poverty and sudden stress on local labor market endangers larger peace and stability worldwide. Excellencies, we in Nepal have invested resources within our capacity to fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. We have employed both preventive and mitigating measures that include testing, contact tracing, quarantine, isolation, and social distancing. We are close to meeting the target of testing 2% of our population. Temporary measures such as nationwide lockdown and restriction in movement help us to contain the virus to a large extent. Number of deaths so far remains minimal. Estimates are that nearly 63% of Nepali workforce will face some degree of impacts, which is more severe in urban areas and in service industries like hotel, restaurant, catering, and tourism sector. We have responded to the situation with some immediate and medium-term measures. For those in informal sector, we have provided food and wage for work as an immediate relief. For those in the formal sector, we have ensured payroll protection, rescheduling, and capitalization of loans and waivers on electricity, among others. We are trying to convert this challenge into opportunity with a special focus on building our health infrastructures. In the medium term, we have devised programs such as Prime Minister's Employment Program, Food for Work, subsidy to private sector for internship wages, skilling for redeployment, and reorienting of poverty alleviation funds for production and sustainable employment generation, restructuring of agriculture, and support to SMEs. Provincial and local governments are also implementing programs for promoting job opportunities in coordination and collaboration with the federal government. While we are committed to partnership and social dialogue in the process, we also look forward to greater solidarity to address the situation globally. I thank you.
We are very grateful to the Prime Minister for his contribution, and the next message will be that of His Excellency Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. Guy Ryder, DG ILO, I want to thank you for holding this virtual ILO summit and at a very critical time for labor all over the world. The lockdown because of the pandemic has hit the labor community the most, and this is why this summit is extremely important, because the issue is ongoing. The virus, the pandemic is ongoing. In some countries it's coming down and then peaking. In other countries it is still peaking. And so therefore it's very important that all of us have some sort of a combined strategy to deal with with this vulnerable section of a society, labor. I will just give you an idea of what we went through, what Pakistan went through when we imposed the lockdown to stop the spread of the virus. We were faced with this twin challenge. On the one hand, we had to deal with a spreading disease which we knew would overwhelm our hospitals. Our healthcare we knew could not cope if suddenly this virus peaked. So on one hand, we had to slow the spread of the virus. But then we had this other problem. What do we do with this informal part of our economy where most of people were self-employed, where the labor force was not registered, so we had no record of our labor force. So when the moment we imposed the lockdown, suddenly all these people became unemployed. And not just unemployed, the self-employed people or the people who were not registered, and that's the majority of the labor in our country, in the informal sector. Now the problem we faced was that this labor, their families depended upon the incomes, the daily incomes or the weekly incomes of this labor. And if they could not earn, their families could not eat. So in the beginning, we had the situation in the first 2-3 weeks where cars going into poor areas of our society were actually attacked by people who were hungry. So therefore, we came up with this idea of a smart lockdown, we decided that we would, on the one hand, stop all places where there were public gatherings, so schools, colleges, marriages, anywhere, sports activities, everything we stopped. But on the other hand, we allowed other activities like construction and agriculture. We did not stop any workers in the agricultural area because, of course, then we would have had a huge food crisis. But construction activity, which employs most amount of workers in our cities, we open it up fairly quickly. On top of it, we decided that we needed to transfer cash to this informal part of our labor, which there was no registration. Those who were registered, we asked the employers to keep them employed, and we compensated for them. But the ones who weren't registered, we set up the system of people registering with our SARS program, which was this program through which we distributed money. We had desks everywhere where people were registering there. We had them checked. And then in Pakistan's history, never was so much money transferred to so many people in such a short space of time. So that's saved us from some of the worst aspects of the lockdown. For instance, we saw what was happening in India. India did the opposite. They went for a curfew almost. And they had the huge problem of millions of migrant workers who were just left stranded. And on top of it, their poverty, because of this very strict lockdown, their poverty rates have gone up. But having said this, the future is very uncertain. We don't know how long the economy will take to recover from the impact of this lockdown. So no one is sure right now where we are headed. And we are all praying that some vaccine comes out as a cure to this virus. But in the meantime, this uncertainty prevails. And what we all know, the most vulnerable section of our society remains our labor. And that's why this summit is extremely important. We need to share ideas. We need to have some sort of a joint strategy on protecting our labor class, our laborers who are at the moment, businesses are going bankrupt. The small and medium industry, which employs the highest number of people, is the most vulnerable. In fact, the most bankruptcies are in the small and medium industry. And that's why we need some sort of a strategy. Our second problem is, of course, our workers who are working abroad. This country depends upon their remittances, and not just Pakistan. I know a lot of other countries depend upon the remittances of their labor working abroad. Mr. Guy Ryder, we need some strategy of how we can convince these countries to be a bit more sympathetic, even though we know all countries are facing huge problems right now. But we need them to be sympathetic to these laborers who are working in countries which we know are facing problems. Secondly, we need some joint strategy, how we can soften the impact on laborers all over the world. So I thank you again for holding this very important conference at a very critical juncture in history as far as labor is concerned. And we would love to share ideas with other people. We would like to know what other countries are planning to do, what their experiences are. We will of course keep people other countries updated with what we are what we are facing and what we feel the way forward is. But this conference is a beginning, I feel. After that, this constant exchange of ideas I'm sure will help all of us to help our labour. Thank you.
I want to thank the Prime Minister for his contribution, and then we will move on to hear the message of Her Excellency Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, State Councillor of the Republic of the Union of Myanmar.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, let me begin by expressing our thanks to the ILO for convening this global summit at this most challenging time for workers all over the world. Last year, we all rejoiced in the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the ILO and the successful adoption of the Centenary Declaration for the Future of Work. Unfortunately, now, barely 9 months after the adoption of the declaration, the world is facing the unexpected outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. This new virus attacks everyone indiscriminately, whether rich or poor, but its impact falls harder on the poor and vulnerable. Workers, in particular women, are affected most severely. Its impact on the economy, labor market, and livelihoods will be more prolonged and hard-hitting than initially expected, as the pandemic is showing no signs of abating. We must therefore strike a balance between our twin objectives, protecting the health of workers and taking measures to ensure that their businesses can keep running. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, for Myanmar, our people are the main source of our strength. To overcome a resource constraint, we have taken a whole-of-nation approach, mobilizing our people. The unique character that has emerged clearly from our pandemic response is strong voluntarism, charity, and a sharing spirit. To ensure that no one is left behind, our response covers all vulnerable segments, including IDPs and affected workers. As a result, we have to date managed to keep the virus under control. As of today, we have only about 300 infected cases and 6 cases of death, and recovery has also been good. We are treading the middle path between our paralleled efforts to protect public health while mitigating economic impacts. At this time of crisis, migrant workers are faced with difficulties in foreign lands where there is no access to social protection. They are looking to their motherland for aid. Myanmar has made every effort to bring back all its citizens and to provide food and assistance to all returnees at quarantine centers until they can go back to their homes in safety. The government is keeping a record of the skills of the returnees and creating job opportunities for them by initiating labor-intensive projects in the construction and agriculture sectors, as well as cash for work schemes linked to rural development. I believe that the issues of the migrant workers is one that deserves ILO's greater attention. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, Myanmar is working together with ILO to promote labor standards, and we are determined to follow up the recommendations of the ILO Centenary Declaration, in particular, protection of labor rights. Recently, we enacted a new child law in line with the Convention of the Rights of the Child and ratified the ILO Minimum Age Convention number 138 to address the issue of child labor. In addressing the challenge of the pandemic, we are following the policy response based on the 4 key pillars suggested by the ILO. First, to stimulate the economy and employment, Myanmar has